So this sixth one is where we're going to consider more around emotional regulation, which is a key category within the emotional playbook. They all are, but this one especially. So when we think about emotional regulation, it is really like the inner lens of someone, how that is adjusted and tweaked accordingly in order for there to be the right kind of picture that's taken the right kind of outcome, that is achieved the right kind of response. So the first way in which we must think is that triggers are not weaknesses when we think about what we've got to regulate upon. So they are windows into potentially unmet needs or previous experiences which could have been negative and haven't really been got over quite yet, unhealed experiences. And we all have those. Every coach, every client has reactions that can happen from, subtle cues, client resistance, perceived criticism. But the thing is, it's about understanding them and being able to work through them in a professional and competent way. So we can't really ignore triggers as coaches or our own triggers as coaches, because if we do, we're not really doing the kind of service that we should do for ourselves or ultimately for our clients. Your reactions will always follow a pattern, and there are decades of research that will back this up. And to change a reactive pattern, you've got to become aware of its sequence. That's why we've started with awareness on the playbook, right? So awareness is the critical first step of stepping in and interrupting that reaction, that trigger, that spark that then creates the explosive nature of something, or just the wrong decision. It doesn't necessarily have to be an explosive situation. And that is detailed here when we think about situation and response. So Gross in 1998, loads of research with regards to the situation and then how someone responds. And then this sweet spot in the middle is essentially where we would look to achieve some sort of time frame where we can then make sure the response is desirable and not a reaction, not something that undermines the long-term outcome or wishes or desires. So this is something which can sometimes be a little bit of a debated aspect. You have a situation, the behavior comes out the other end, but what comes first after the situation? Is it a thought? Is it an emotion? Is it emotion? Is it thought? Well, actually, they're very, very neurologically intertwined very quickly. So, irrespective, and it can be previous experiences, and it can also be just like neurological, emotional responses that come first. It's really about bringing this time frame which is and allows there to be an awareness and then for a choice that can be made. And from a regulation point of view, if you don't have this time aspect, then ultimately it's going to be quite the challenge to be able to orientate the behavior or change of behavior that you're looking to facilitate. You need to name what's happening in order to be able to tame what's happening. And especially when you think about emotional activation. So the Dan Siegel's research shows that his naming reduces the emotional intensity, and then it promotes neural integration, and therefore you can be avoiding that flooding of emotion, and you can become aware of it more of an astral position in some cases, but you can observe it in order to be able to make some really strong decisions moving forward. So a focus task, when we think about this, again, we obviously start with the identifying of the moment. So reflect on one recent moment in your professional life or personal life, it's up to you, that sparked frustration, defensiveness, or another strong reaction. It can be any number of things, but who was involved, what specifically was said or done that created, this moment. We're not thinking anything at the moment, just the moment that happened, okay? What was the context as well? And then when we understand what the context is and who is involved and specifically what was said and done, we have clarity over identifying the exact situation that's at play, or how and what the trigger is that's being formed. And then when we explore the sequence, we can start to map it in a more clear way. And then when we have this in place, we can start to unpack the options that we actually have, but we need the specificity to be there. So situation, what was the objective? What was the event? Thought, what was the immediate thought, interpretation in your mind, or emotion? You can interchange those two. What specific emotion did you feel? And then the behavior, what did you do, say, or how did you act in and because of what had come before it? And when we bring that together, we can have clear identity over precisely what the trigger was, what the word, tone of voice, or the specific topic, what the belief was when we explore, and maybe there was vulnerability beneath that reaction, or what core need might have been threatened, or value might have been threatened, or conflicting interest. And then critically, we would also then shift, which is the really important part. And we can do that by grounding, by taking a deep breath, creating that pause, a deliberate pause, or we can have some sort of physical cue or something that can help us by keeping in contact with something. So that can then give us that time frame to then shift and allow us to process accordingly. When we think about the idea of reactivity and response to responsibility, so becoming aware of your triggers is a pivot point, and it transforms what is essentially an unconscious reaction to a conscious choice. And this is a critical part of emotional mastery. So once you have and you do understand that, then there is this sense of, well, I know now, so there's almost non-justification of me responding like this. It has to, or reacting like this, it has to be a response. And your mastery is your model. So if we think about coaches that can pause before reacting, they bring a lot of responses objectively, they can manage their own emotional states, and they are essentially creating an environment which is and does feel safe and calm for the clients to then do the same. And their work that they do with you, whether it health, fitness, well-being, whether it be across a broader life coaching aspect, you can still then provide you as a pivot point or as a modeling point for them to then take away that idea of emotional regulation. Remember, the triggers essentially can set themselves up as guides, or if you are and not willing to see them as guides, then they can cause more and irrevocable trouble for us. So seeing them as not as interruptions, but as an invitation for us to engage and understand, and then build self-awareness, and then almost have a sense of understanding and learning from them, will allow there to be a progress forward and to be able to become more emotionally regulated in a sustained way. So that's that little focus task. So have a look at that, and I'll see you in the next one.